Wealth, power, and influence. Few men ever wielded such force over an emerging nation as John Pierpont Morgan. His decisions, often decisive with the stroke of a pen, could rescue a dying company or plunge an industry further into chaos. Hated by some, admired by others, his singular presence reshaped American finance, leaving a legacy still felt today. Chapter 1. The Early Trials of a Titan. Born in 1837 in Connecticut into privilege, young John was granted the best education by his father, Junius Spencer Morgan, a successful banker who intended for him to follow in his footsteps. Yet, despite his refined surroundings, John's childhood was not one of carefree wealth. He was a frail child, plagued by brutal coughing fits, debilitating migraines, seizures, and recurring bouts of scarlet fever. His physical weakness confined him indoors. While other children played, John found solace in books and detailed financial statements. These early habits, meticulously recording every expense and income, would later become the bedrock of his financial genius. When a severe bout of rheumatic fever threatened his already precarious health, his father made a dramatic decision. John was sent to live alone on the remote Azores Islands. In isolation, amid endless Atlantic horizons and the cleansing power of salty air, he not only recovered, but also honed a disciplined mindset. His studies expanded to include finance, economics, and European culture, a solitary sojourn that tempered his naturally hot-headed instinct with careful analysis. By 1857, enriched by his studies in Boston, Switzerland, and Germany, Morgan was ready to leave behind the confines of academia and step into the bustling world of American finance. His early career was punctuated by daring moves, a notable example being his 1859 purchase of an entire shipment of Brazilian coffee in New Orleans using company funds. Although the risk yielded handsome profits, it also hinted at his spirited impulsiveness, which would both build his empire and unsettle his mentors. Tragedy struck on a personal level too. In 1861, at just 24, Morgan married his first love, Amelia Sturgis. Yet, despite the brief happiness they shared, Amelia's health faltered under a persistent case of tuberculosis. Their honeymoon in the Mediterranean, hoped to be a healing escape, ended in loss just 4 months later. Devastated, Morgan channeled his grief into relentless work, a decision that would define his emerging financial philosophy. Even as the nation descended into the turmoil of the American Civil War, Morgan was quick to find ways to navigate his future. He even paid a $300 fee to avoid conscription, so he could focus on building his financial empire rather than fighting on the battlefield. Chapter 2. War, Risk, and the Seeds of Ambition. As the Civil War raged and opportunities arose from chaotic upheaval, Morgan began to show his acumen for high-stakes risk and reward. Teaming up with the influential Anthony Drexel, he co-founded the merchant banking firm Drexel, Morgan & Co., the precursor to what would eventually become JPMorgan Co. Although his early role involved reporting on America's nascent political and financial scene, Morgan was not content to remain a passive observer. Even in his youth, he was known to push boundaries, his bold, though occasionally reckless decisions paving the way for later triumphs. Morgan's ability to decipher crisis from opportunity was on full display in the burgeoning railroad industry. At a time when fierce price wars and severe competition left the sector fragmented, he saw disorder where others saw risk. His solution was radical: consolidation. By acquiring underfinanced railroads, streamlining management, and merging these disparate companies into a unified conglomerate, a strategy soon dubbed Morganization, he set about reshaping the nation's transportation network. At one point, his influence extended to owning roughly 1/3 of all American railroads, a feat remarkable considering railroads then accounted for 60% of the nation's market capitalization. While Morgan's shrewd financial tactics fueled unprecedented growth in the railroad sector, his method was as hands-on as it was visionary. Not one to sit idly by after investing, he took an active role in boardrooms, often reshuffling leadership and mandating full control before offering aid to struggling railroads. Yet, even as his professional reputation skyrocketed, the man behind the empire bore personal scars. Morgan suffered from a disfiguring skin condition, rosacea coupled with rhinophyma, that made him acutely self-conscious about his appearance. This vulnerability, hidden behind a stern, aggressive exterior, would later color public perceptions of his otherwise formidable financial poise. Chapter 3. Building Empires in an Age of Industry. Morgan's appetite for consolidation was not confined to railroads. By the dawn of the 20th century, as the steel industry reached its zenith, another opportunity emerged. In 1901, as Carnegie Steel dominated the nation's metallurgical landscape yet readied itself for the founder's retirement, Morgan stepped forward. He convinced Andrew Carnegie to name his price, an astronomical $480 million, and even later confessed he would have paid $100 million more under different circumstances. This purchase paved the way for the creation of U.S. Steel, the world's first billion-dollar corporation, formed by merging Carnegie Steel with the Federal Steel Company and other enterprises. In a country where all manufacturing traded at a combined capitalization of about $9 billion, Morgan's audacious consolidation granted him control over almost two-thirds of America's steel production. But the scope of his vision extended beyond tangible industries. Morgan also played a critical role in nurturing the burgeoning fields of electricity and communications. He financed Thomas Edison's early experiments, which eventually catalyzed the formation of General Electric and helped set the stage for what would become AT&T. In bridging traditional heavy industry monopolies with the new age of technological innovation, Morgan's strategies hinted at a transformative blueprint for modern corporate America. Chapter 4: Saving a Nation and Raising Questions. Morgan's genius was most evident when the country teetered on the brink of financial collapse. The American economic landscape faced its most precarious moments during the Depression of 1893 and again in the harrowing crisis of 1907. In the 1893 Depression, as the nation's gold reserves dwindled and panic spread like wildfire, Morgan orchestrated a bold rescue plan. He assembled a private syndicate of the nation's leading bankers and collaborated with foreign investors to shore up gold reserves by purchasing $65 million in long-term gold bonds using millions of ounces of gold, all under a statute that allowed immediate action. His decisive intervention reassured a rattled public and stabilized a faltering economy. The crisis of 1907 presented another testing moment. With banks on the verge of collapse and enraged depositors lining up to withdraw their funds, Morgan once again stepped in. Even at the age of 70 and weakened by a persistent cold that left him coughing throughout the high-stakes negotiations, he summoned leading financiers to his private library on Madison Avenue. There, in a strategy as unconventional as it was effective, he literally locked the room until consensus was reached on a rescue plan. This act of financial triage not only injected vital capital into endangered institutions, but also restored public confidence. Yet, these heroic image moments were double-edged. They intensified public debate over the dangers of entrusting vast economic power to one individual, raising ethical and political questions that would culminate in congressional investigations. When faced with scrutiny, most notably during testimony before the 𝐼𝐻 Committee, which unearthed the far-reaching money trust of Wall Street, Morgan's personal vulnerabilities and mental toll became increasingly apparent. Known to have suffered multiple nervous breakdowns under the pressure of constant public and media glare, his later years were marked by growing isolation and internal conflict. In an ironic twist of fate, he was scheduled to board the Titanic on its maiden voyage, but was forced to withdraw at the last moment due to health issues, a poignant metaphor for the precarious balance between monumental power and human frailty. Chapter 5: The Legacy That Redefined American Finance. Morgan's life was and remains a saga of contradictions. His pioneering methods of merging industries and shoring up collapsing economies reshaped American finance and laid the groundwork for modern corporate governance. When he passed away in 1913 at the age of 75, while on vacation in Rome, he left behind an empire that his son would continue to build. Today, that legacy endures in the likes of JPMorgan Chase, the world's largest bank by market capitalization, which today manages trillions of dollars in assets. Yet, even as his business acumen is celebrated, debates persist over the ethics of his methods. Was Morgan a patriotic savior, uniting disparate financial elements to rescue the nation from economic disaster? Or was he the archetype of the ruthless robber baron, willing to line his own pockets at the nation's expense? The truth, as in life, is layered and complex. Morgan's story, a blend of early hardship, audacious risk-taking, and an iron will tempered by vulnerability, serves as an enduring lesson in both the promise and perils of concentrated power in modern finance.